I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of October 29th, 2019. Would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sue, could we please have a reiteration of the executive session motions?
Yes, the board met in executive session for discussion with our attorneys and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of Civil Service Law.
So at our last meeting, I forgot to mention that a couple weeks ago, Cheryl and Jim and I had a great meeting with the co-chairs from the Junior League of the Julianne's Playground revamp, I guess is what I will call it. The Junior League has chosen that project as their next signature project, which is really exciting. And it was equally as exciting to see their very preliminary plans from the landscape architect. They're just ideas, but it was really a neat way to address beautifying that area and sort of meeting the needs of kids of all ages so that it's accessible and exciting for kids throughout town, no matter what their age is. So we're going to continue to stay in close communication with them as they hone in on their plans and their fundraising efforts. But I did want to mention that they're hosting a community roundtable on Thursday, November 14th at 7:30 at the Pelham Arts Center. It's right after the SEPTA meeting, so you can go to both. And their goal there is to share their vision for this project and to collect some ideas from the community as well, because it will be a big undertaking from a fundraising perspective. And so I hope many of you guys will be able to join us that evening. And also, I just wanted to mention, we've had so much loss this year. I feel like every other meeting, there's another member of our community, or family member of our community who's passed away. This week, we learned the sad news that our security monitor at the high school, middle school, John Van Bergen, he's known as Big John to the kids, passed away. And sadly, on the same day, I believe it was the same day, the greeter at Siwanoy, Angela, her husband passed away. So I just wanted to send condolences to both of their families. It's been really, since this summer, a really hard stretch. So anyhow, that's where I'll leave things. I just wanted to allot as much time to our exciting work session on the whole child, and I'm hoping to get to go home and see my Washington Nationals pull it out tonight. So we'll see. So that brings us to approval of the minutes from October 15th, 2019, 3.1. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Section 4, Administrative and Committee Reports. 4.1, Superintendent's Report.
Great, thank you. Well, I just want to first echo Jessica's sentiment on the loss of Big John. I think it took people like a long time to come to terms with the texts and the notes that they were getting because they didn't think it was possible. But it unfortunately is true. I know Ms. Sabia had grade level assemblies, met with the students, and parents and staff were notified at both middle school and high school where he directly worked. Although clearly we know John had a reach around the community. So a lot of ideas have come forward already of appropriate ways to recognize him. So we're working with the principals to come up with something so that we can really just do something to mark his legacy on the school as the students and the staff and parents and community members really all will miss the contribution that he brought to everyone. So we will be looking to do something in the very near future to recognize John, and we very much will miss him. Couple student recognitions to start us off as usual. Congratulations to the staff of the 2018-19 Pell Mell. This publication was recently awarded the ranking of silver medalist by the Columbia Scholastic Press Association. And also on October 19th and 20th, our forensics team competed at the Big Bronx New York City Invitational Tournament at Bronx High School of Science. This is a competitive national circuit tournament with schools coming from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, Maryland, California, Virginia, North Carolina, and Minnesota. Congratulations go to junior Isaac Blackburn and Nicholas Liegi, our senior, for advancing to the semifinals in congressional debate. Also at the high school level, some significant achievements from our athletics. Certainly the big one, field hockey. I look down the table, proud dad down there. Field hockey defeated Pearl River 1-0 in double overtime and have advanced to the sectional semifinals. They will play on Wednesday evening in Somers. Our girls soccer, volleyball, and boys unfortunately all came to the end of their seasons, but we're incredibly proud of their efforts and their sportsmanship and their hard work throughout the season. We have one special note from the elementaries. I do ask all the principals if there's ever anything special they want to highlight, and I did get a nice one this week from Mrs. Fitzgerald from Hutchinson School. Under the student government at Hutchinson, under the direction of Mrs. Gentile, hosted Spirit Week. It was a great success, and they were able to raise $1,180 that was donated to the Ronald McDonald House. Incredibly proud of their fundraising efforts and their community spirit that they brought together through this. Our elementaries do such an amazing job in so many different ways, and that's just one small example. But $1,180 to the Ronald McDonald House. We're very thankful for those efforts and proud of our students.
And some of the hairdos that I saw posted on Facebook on Crazy Hair Day. Wow,
Always
I was very
fun.
impressed.
Also this week, I wanted to take just a moment to recognize that it is Board Appreciation Month, Board of Education. So as we've done in the past, we always try to do something special to kind of highlight some of the different either initiatives or programs that the board has supported over the years. So instead of things this year, we've had makerspace items that were created in the past. I think we had a FLES video last year. This year, we wanted to highlight, and of course, our superstars sitting right in the middle of the front row. We wanted to highlight the Writers' Workshop. That is a program that we really went full K-5 implementation last year, which is a big undertaking involving a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of professional development, financial investment in materials and supplies, and professional development, an incredible amount of work under the leadership of Dr. Thompson. So what we've done under Alex and Janine Carr, I think we're key players in this one. Yes. And Maria, the star of the show. Nobody likes to see themselves on film, we'll just put it that way.
I was waiting for like a tap dance or something.
Yeah.
She was the star of the show.
We've put together a little video, they have put together a little video for the board, so you can see some of the fruits of the labor of your decision-making and your resource allocation. I think many of us know, but just as a reminder, the Teachers College Writing Program offers a student-centered approach to writing and literacy that encourages creativity through writing, opportunities for feedback, and an emphasis on revision and editing. It also builds public speaking skills as students routinely share their work with peers, and it really ties in with our goals of authentic learning, with the whole child, and with building relationships, understanding culture, and sharing culture. So it's a perfect program for us to be implementing at this time. So without further ado, I will let Alex cue us off on the video.
Once there was a fight over the
Workshop is all about growing writers and growing readers. Our students are explicitly taught the skills and the process of writing through the mini lesson and through conferencing.
Zoe slid down the slide. She was still all by herself. Want to play? Camille said. Wait a minute. Wait, she's on the slide, sliding, and then someone comes up and says, want to play? Should we reread that again? So hold on. She's walking around the field. Now she slid down the slide. She was still all by herself. Want to play? Camille said. Do you think that we could get that into baby steps? Turn and talk to your writing partner. What could I write? Help me. What could I do? And how could I do it? What should we be doing in our minds?
But you're going to see now, as we start our final writing piece, that every time you write it, something new is going to come out of it. And
You don't see a student covering up what they've written because they're ashamed that there might have some spelling errors. You should see children that are proud and want to share.
The Missing Dog by me. Once upon a time, there was a boy. His name was Dan. He had a dog named Jack. Jack was a good dog. As for Jack, he never got lost again.
When we peer listen to each other's stories, we first start with a compliment. So what would you compliment about Sally's story?
I like that you had two problems, not just one. First, it was about how the dog went missing, and then it was that they didn't have a red ball. They both kind of got fixed, so I like that.
Yeah, I did too. I also thought your vocabulary was off the charts. It was engaging. It was interesting. It was the way you read your story really brought it out. Yes.
We also try to instill in our students this idea that it's not about being right or wrong, that you can write a piece that may not be perfect, and no one is going to take a red pen to that piece. Instead, you will see students doing their own editing and revising. Teachers and peers will help if things are overlooked.
That's all I have done. So your turn. Can I just give you a comment? Okay. I like that you gave all your pages a title. Thanks. One day it was my dad's birthday, so my mom came early to pick us up. When we got home, I saw my dad's. I like the sticky note that you added, and also on the second page I like the giant letters, and also on the first page I like how you wrote everything so neatly.
Students are excited to write. They write a lot. Their writing folders and their writing notebooks are filled to the brim. And even our little ones, they write through drawing. So their pictures tell their story. And then as they learn more phonics and phonemic awareness, they start to do some inventive spelling and actually try to write a story with their pictures and stretch out their words. And they help each other do that. One of the really important philosophies of writing workshop is this idea of rehearsal or oral rehearsal. So you will grow as a writer if you practice your story or your writing orally first. Thank you to the Board of Education for supporting the growth of Writing Workshop and the professional development and resources that go along with it.
If it's ready by the time the next book fair comes, then can I just put it somewhere on the book fair?
Oh, you want to sell your book?
Yeah.
Why not?
So to echo what Dr. Thompson said in the video, programs like this are only possible because of the support of the Board of Education and the support you provide to our teachers, administrators, and most importantly, what you got to see our students. So seeing them grow as a result of your vision and leadership, on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for your work in that. And I'm going to read now a proclamation from our governor about Board of Education's. So whereas each year, School Board Recognition Week is observed by more than 700 school boards in school districts throughout the Empire State, and whereas our state's public education system is designed to meet the educational needs of all children, to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to society. That sounds familiar. That sounds like our strategic plan. In an ever-changing world, and whereas members of local school boards are dedicated to children, learning, and community, and devote many hours of service to elementary and secondary public education as they continually strive for improvement, excellence, and progress in education, recognizing that all children can be successful learners, especially when education is tailored to the individual needs of the child. And whereas local school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectations to the district. by working closely with parents, educational professionals, and other community members to create the educational vision we all hold for today's students and those in the future. And whereas the members of the New York State's local school boards respond to the educational needs of the communities they serve and help ensure the solid foundation of our school system. In doing so, these leaders help strengthen our state's educational system and improve future prospects for our children. And whereas during the week October 21st through 25th, which was last week, we did not have a meeting, but we did produce the video during that week. Special activities and programs will be held in communities across New York State in observance of School Board Recognition Week. We're going to make it a month in Pelham, and it is fitting to join in acknowledging the commitment and contributions of members of local school boards. Now, therefore, I, Andrew Cuomo, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim October 21st through 25th, or the month of October if you're in Pelham, as School Board Recognition Week month. So just a little token of appreciation, a certificate for each of you on the board. To, I guess I should put Vinny that direction, sorry. Eileen.
Thank you.
Jessica, down that way, just to thank you for your
you.
service and time and commitment and investment in the school district. Appreciate it.
It's very nice, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And that ends my report for tonight.
Very nice. So I know 4.2 is the committee reports, Board of Ed committee reports. I know we had a policy committee meeting, but we have policy section in this agenda. Are there any other meetings to report back on?
I had a quick one yesterday morning, Monday the 28th of the Audit Committee. First thing we did was we welcomed the new members to the Audit Committee, which was nice. We had a couple of returnees and a new member, which was nice. The key part of the meeting that we had was the establishment of two areas that our internal auditors, who are Cullen and Danowski, will be reviewing this coming year. Every year they select two different areas within this district, and this year the two areas selected were the purchasing procedures, which actually kind of goes hand in hand with one of the policies that we'll be looking at, and the second is staff attendance, which what they basically do with each one of these, they do sample testing throughout, and the testing they do is over a couple of day period. Is that right, Jim?
Yes.
And they come back with their report, we review it, and take the recommendations and
Right, and then present the findings
to the board, right, exactly. In addition to that, we looked at the investment policy that we presently have for the excess funds that the school district has, which are very limited. They're very conservative, to say the least, which is appropriate under the circumstances. That too, I believe, is a policy that we'll be bringing to the board.
Yes,
Am I correct
at the
about
next
that?
meeting.
At the next meeting.
Is that one that we do every year, like purchasing?
Yeah,
is.
Yeah, I thought
exactly
so.
right.
Like, I remember this from last year.
We also looked at, we decided that we're gonna put out RFPs for a couple of our auditors. We have three auditors. We have an external auditor, which, if you recall, we went out to an RFP process last year. It's a 5-year term. We again selected O'Connor Davies last year. This year, we're gonna send out an RFP for our internal auditors, Cullen and Danowski, as well as our claims auditors that we have. Our claims auditors basically review all of our disbursements. They compare the process, they compare the purchase orders against the monies, the signatures, making sure that everything is appropriate from that perspective. So a couple other things, but that was the gist of the meeting.
Sounds like it was a good one. Any others? Okay, so Assistant Superintendent's update on finance and facilities, 4.3.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. I'll try to be brief. Thank you, Vinny, for talking about the audit committee. It's a great way to start the week at 7:30 in the morning with an audit committee on a Monday. So, no, it is great. And welcome to those new members as well. And the internal auditors will be in the office this week doing their sample testing that you spoke about. So once we get that information, we expect to share that with the board, probably in the January, February timeframe with those final results. Last week, we started something very exciting, at least in the business office world, with electronic payments for AP exams. And hopefully, we'd like to be able to expand electronic payments that we receive, that people have to pay for certain events for our other items as well. So really, right now, we've started utilizing our current system that we use for food services. There's another module that you can use where we can accept payments for other items. So like I said, we started off with AP payments because those are exams that people have to pay for so they can get their college credit. It's $94 per test, and we have to tell the College Board how many tests we need to order within the next few weeks, and we have to pay for those exams. So what we've done as a convenience factor is we do have this new electronic payment system. There is a service charge of about 3.75%. If people choose to use the convenience of this system, they have the ability to do that. If they don't, they're certainly welcome to continue using it at our current process and not incur that fee again. We're just trying to create some conveniences for folks. So we've got 126 exams paid for within the last week, which is terrific. Collected over $11,000. From an internal audit risk standpoint, we like this as well because those dollars are automatically, every day they're deposited into our accounts as well, and it's a reduction of a risk profile. So we're happy to do this, and we're looking to see strategically how we can implement this district-wide as well for different things. You could use it for class trips, caps and gowns, and such items. So again, nice and exciting, and we think it'll be really great for our parents as a convenience. And especially when you get the call from your kids or a text from your kids 11 o'clock the day the money is due.
Can do something about it.
Exactly. See, we've got a recourse rather than running down here with the check. We also have, this evening, on this evening's agenda, we have a budget transfer request. These are dollars that originally came from Senator Klein. We're using those monies for our cultural proficiency training with Campbell Jones. So you'll see that as one of the transfer items this evening. We are disposing of some equipment. Dr. Callahan's allowing us to get rid of, or has asked us to dispose of some microscopes. Once we go ahead and do that, we'll put them online and we'll see who will pay us whatever they'll pay for those items, just as we do with all of our disposal of the things that the board, that we no longer need, are surplus or obsolete. Huge thank you again. PEF has very generously come through with 3 grants for this meeting that we're asking the board to accept for just under $10,000 for theater makeup, jazz band artist in residence, as well as chorus artist in residence. So very generous, and I know they're very excited to receive those for our students. 314 Pelhamdale, that's the house we purchased in July. We've been working with the architect on the plans and a timeline for submitting plans to the state for final approval. We've got a project number. We still have not yet submitted the plans, so we expect to get a timeline shortly from them. We anticipate that I've asked them for what expedited review would look like, because it looks like the state education process has become backlogged once again. They've had some turnover in personnel, and it looks like things have really slowed down. So for 314 Pelhamdale, I hope to get some more information, and we want to get this through the state ed process relatively quickly. Again, this says we're hoping to turn this into office space, so it's electrical work, bathroom, ADA compliance, and HVAC for air conditioning. So those are the three main things that we'll be looking at. With our capital projects right now, Prospect Hill is still at the state review process. It cleared the engineering review, which is normally done at the tail end of the process, as I've learned to understand. So it still has to go through the front end of the process. And we're expecting that to come through probably in the December, as I looked at it, I think it was the late November time period. So it really got caught up in that time frame where state ed had that turnover. And right now, as we talk to the architect, it really wouldn't make a lot of sense to switch over to expedited review. We're kind of in that point where it's about the same, we figure it's about the same time frame, whether we stay the course or if we change. We are out to bid for middle school, high school renovation work for this summer. Those bids are expected to come back on Thursday. And then we are also out to bid for the Hutchinson, the new Hutchinson school. We had a walkthrough last week. We had a really terrific turnout, in total about 20 folks of varying trades, plumbers, demolition people, electricians. We identified about 5 prime contractors for this particular job, and they're all really all seem to be very interested in the job. So we're working with the architect and the construction manager. The bids are due to come back next week, to be open next week. Depending on what we hear, we may extend that by a week as well, because we want to make sure we get a robust bidding field. So that's pretty exciting as well, too. Last 2 days, not a lot of work has happened on the field at Glover. I think that's because a lot of fields were ruined over the weekend. They had some rain in some other places, so they've been pulled off working on some other areas right now. The tennis courts had some of the sealant put on it. The fencing should be going in shortly. And really, depending on the weather, that's gonna depend on when the final color surface comes onto the playing surface for the tennis courts. Let's see, Prospect Hill I talked about Hutchinson, I talked about middle school, and I talked about tennis courts. I think I got it all, and I hit the bottom of my list. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so this brings us to Section 5, Policy Monitoring and Governance. 5.1, Policy 5410, Purchasing. This is our second reading.
Yes, so this is the
Eileen.
second reading. Obviously, nothing has changed since the first reading. Any questions? Okay, this seems like one that we could waive the third reading, since it hasn't changed since ever, May. So if there's nobody's opposed to that, if somebody could move to waive the third reading?
So moved.
Second.
Great. So all in favor of waiving the third reading? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. It's our first policy.
One.
We have to approve the
I think we have to approve.
Oh, sorry.
We just waived them.
Not
Just
yet.
getting so excited.
Exactly. We waived the third reading. Okay. So then would somebody move to approve the policy?
Approve the policy on purchasing.
Second. All in favor of approving policy? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Great, now it's been our first policy. Yay! So the second policy we have this week is wellness. I'll tell you a little bit about this policy. So it is one that is required to be reviewed and approved at least every 3 years. So the policy has obviously been in existence, it's mandated. It has previously only really addressed nutrition and physical activity, and the Wellness Committee felt strongly about adding in a mental health component to the policy. Now, right now, at this very moment, we don't have so much detail around our plans for mental health education or any of those things, and we're gonna see a whole presentation about it tonight. So when you read the policy, right now, it is definitely unbalanced in the level of detail put to nutrition and physical activity versus mental health. But we felt comfortable based on the work of the Wellness Committee that by including a couple of statements, one in the very beginning and then one towards the end, about health education and the district's commitment to continuing to develop policies and curriculum and procedures in those areas, and go ahead with that right now. The fact is, we don't have to wait 3 years to update the policy again. So if at the end of this school year, if we feel like we have more detail and it's worth putting in now, we can do that. We could do it next year, we could do it anytime in the next 3 years. So we felt comfortable moving forward with it right now. Any questions? Has everybody had a chance to read the policy?
Were there any other changes that were significant other than the addition of the mental health component?
There were not really.
Yeah, I think if you look at the red line
Yeah.
version, a lot of it was just edits, most of it was edits from the attorneys, just really grammatical changes. We'd updated some of the membership of the committees, taking out specific names, putting in titles, et cetera, those kinds of things.
But I remember last year, from Policy Committee, the review of this through Wellness informed kind of the proper composition of that committee
Correct.
too, right?
Yep.
Which was
Yep, it helped a lot.
helpful.
Yes.
It does seem to make sense to put I don't want to call it a place marker because it's in here, but, given the state mandates for a K through 12 curriculum and our new strategic plan on the whole child, just to add to that.
Memorialize it.
Yeah.
Yeah, acknowledge, yeah.
But to continue to add to that in the future, so
Right.
that it really echoes our priorities.
And we talked about it a lot, and it does exactly that. We think it reflects our commitment to the strategic plan and the importance that we feel mental health plays in everybody's life in the district.
trying to add the focus to mental health. I guess I was confused why that heading was specifically removed from that portion
In
of
the
it.
end?
Yeah. You're just trying to to refer to this as health education, like not so much
Overall,
as
right.
different
And I-
types of health.
I'm
And I
pretty sure
think
that was,
originally it was health education, then the wellness committee added mental health, and then the attorneys took
Took
the
it
part
out.
back out.
Okay, that's what
So
that
again, I
means.
think they were trying to adhere a little bit more to the, kind of the standard, the attorneys. Yeah.
So all components of
was-
health then?
it was initially
Yeah.
health education was the name of the section. Wellness made it into health and mental health education, and the attorneys struck out and mental health. So it's health education.
I think
Well,
They were kind of adhering to the more typical template.
and I think it's implicit when you read the policy now, it's
It's in
implicit that
Yeah.
health
Yeah.
also encompasses mental health.
right.
Yeah, and a lot of this is embedded within the health education curriculum standard, so it does to a degree make sense. But I think what Eileen's articulated too, that but within a year, we're kind of anticipating with the work that Julie is doing with the wellness committee, but also going again through the guidance plan, the comprehensive guidance plan. We feel confident that a year from now, we're gonna have a much better level of detail to really make this a much more robust section. So I think that's where we'll go back and revisit it, and maybe it deserves its own section at that point too, instead of being wrapped into health education.
But it seemed like this, the way that it reads now, it emphasizes that mental health is important.
No, I see that. I'm just curious why the attorneys decided to take out
And
one
it's a
word.
component of health, I guess, in
Yeah,
general.
right.
Yeah.
Curious.
Okay, any other questions? Discussion? No? Oh, Jess, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, that completes our policy section. Eileen's doing a good job running the meeting. Now I have a substitute if
That's
I
right,
need
no
it.
action needed tonight. It's just
Yeah.
a
Right, just a first reading.
Okay, perfect. And based on the policy meeting that you just had, we anticipate others coming
Yes.
to us
Yes,
at the next
definitely,
meeting.
yeah.
Okay,
There's a couple more that we think are ready. We were, Jim wanted to have his audit meeting and potentially a facilities meeting as well, before we move those
For
items
another one.
forward. But we do anticipate probably a couple coming forward for first reading at the next meeting.
okay.
We don't meet again until the 19th, but we might have some more for the 12th,
That are
the
ready.
Board of Ed meeting on the 12th.
Gotcha, okay. Section 6, maybe the smallest we've seen yet this year. It's 3 items, and I'm gonna consent 2 of them, 6.1 and 6.2. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I will take 6.3 by itself because it's a donation, a motion to accept a donation. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So I'll read this one out loud. This is what Jim referenced from the Pelham Education Foundation. Generous as always. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education of the Pelham Union Free School District does hereby accept the monetary donation of $3,120 for Grant 2005 theatrical makeup and its use in the development of characterization for the purchase of 50 makeup kits for the theater arts classes and theater productions, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. Be it further resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools and the Board of Education in Pelham does hereby accept the monetary donation of $1,600 for Grant 2006 Artist in Residence for the high school and middle school chorus to fund the residency of Pastor Wright, a choral consultant and clinician, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. Be it further resolved that upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education of the Pelham Union Free School District does hereby accept the monetary donation of $5,000 for Grant 2007 Jazz Band Artist in Residence to fund the residency of Sean Noel, a jazz musician, and that gratitude be bestowed upon its donor, the Pelham Education Foundation. Fantastic. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we're section 7, Superintendent's Personnel Recommendation. 7.1, motion to approve Schedule A instructional. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a teacher who is going on, two teachers who will be going on leaves, and the appointment of one of those replacements. Another one is forthcoming. We have interviews on Friday.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 7.2, motion to approve Schedule B, annual appointments for 2019-2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So the cleaning up of some more annual appointments. Some people have rescinded, but also just making sure we have all those positions filled.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? 7.3, motion to approve Schedule C, instructional. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And we have some substitute teachers and some volunteers, observers being appointed.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, section 7.4, I almost lost track. Motion to approve Schedule C, non-instructional staff. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. We have the appointment of 4 school monitors and the appointment of a school nurse at Prospect Hill.
Any questions or comments?
Just say at long last.
I know,
Yes.
actually, as I heard
Appointment
it,
of a nurse at Prospect Hill.
as I heard that, I was thinking that it just rang through my ears a little
We're
bit
very-
late,
we're
but
very
that's been one on
excited.
the table for a
So I
while.
thank
Yes.
Mrs. Carr for her patience, I thank the parents for their patience. We've had a great substitute in place in the meantime this year, thankfully, so we're just happy to finally be recommending a candidate tonight, and we're pleased with the candidate that's finally coming to us.
Mhm.
Great. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have a Schedule E again, 7.5, motion to approve Schedule E, instructional. Do I have a motion?
Second.
And we have another from last meeting. We did all the salary reclassifications, and we missed one, so to add it to the list.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Section 8, People Personnel Services. Motion to approve Schedule D, special education.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we're on to new business, 9.1. Any new business? Okay, and we're doing comments later, right? So this brings us to our work session on the whole child. Take it away, Julia.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So tonight's work session will focus on the whole child goal of the strategic plan. As we had done previously with the authentic learning goal, excuse me, we shared the goal with the community and solicited comments regarding the goal. So we used thought exchange, and the question that we used is, how is the district currently supporting the needs of your children as defined in the whole child goal, and how would you like to see us grow in this area? So there were 222 participants, and the number of thoughts that were shared were 221. And the number of ratings for those 221 thoughts was 6,433.
People have picked up on the rating.
Yes.
And the more ratings you get, the more reliability you get
Yep.
to the comments.
So thought exchange actually allows for various ways of looking at the data, but for this particular goal and looking at all of the thoughts, we decided to look at the themes based on the number of similar thoughts. And we have 9 different themed areas that were identified. For each theme, what I did was I added the number of thoughts next to the title of the theme, and then I added the average number of stars. So, and the stars are from 1 to 5, and 5 being most relevant to the rater. So the largest category with 65 thoughts were regarding social emotional supports, as you can see, and the average rating was 3 stars. And let's see, what I did for each of the categories is I added the top 3 most highly rated thoughts so that I can share the ones that people felt were most relevant and important. So under social emotional supports, mental and emotional support structures are as important as academic ones in order for children to succeed. Another thought was, why do many of our students experience elevated levels of stress and anxiety? What can we do to mitigate this pervasive problem, which I think we all recognize is an issue? I would like to see even more emphasis on social emotional support in all grades. And I can assure you, we are doing that. The next category was diversity. There were a total of 31 thoughts, and the average number of stars it was given was 3.5. The district needs more proactive curriculum about ethnic, religious, and gender diversity. SE is weak around race, class, gender expression, sexual orientation. A curriculum of respect that explicitly addresses these needs to be added. And lastly, I want to see more emphasis on building empathy and confronting intolerance and hate, especially for racial and religious minorities and LGBTQ students.
Can I ask what might be a dumb question? What does SE stand for?
I'm sorry, social emotional.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Actually, I just kind of copied and pasted because that's how it was written, so I left it as S/E. Okay. So the next two areas were, let's see, connectedness was the next theme that rose, and there were 27 thoughts and 3.4 stars. We can do more to involve children who may feel left out because they're not athletes or actors. And I know that's something that is common in many districts. The next thought was, we need to continue to create opportunities for our students to feel connected to the school community and their peers. Overemphasis on sports, would love to see more balance. The next category is regarding homework, assessment, instruction, and there were a total of 25 thoughts, 3.1 stars. Multiple hours of homework for middle school children is unhealthy. I think we can all agree on that. Too much homework is assigned in high school. My kids are young, but I cherish any creative learning experience they engage in. For example, at Colonial, the architecture unit in kindergarten.
Numerous elementary homework comments as well. They didn't rise to the top three, but they were there.
Right. The next two were the area of parents and social skills. So there were 24 thoughts. No more robust structure, need more robust structure to support students who lack parental support. Teachers are where the rubber meets the road because they have the most and deepest contact with our students. I would like to see more communication with parents. And then in terms of social skills, there were a total of 20 thoughts. The explicit teaching of social skills is necessary to creating students who get along, communicate, and are decent human beings. I am very happy to see the district continuing to prioritize the whole child, social emotional learning, and ensuring safe, healthy school culture. And lastly, being able to function in society, asking questions, being strong emotionally, being empathetic, and caring and aware of their place in the world and the impact we all have as individuals. The next two, there were 16 thoughts, 3.5 stars, 3.6 stars. Now, there were less thoughts for the last three categories, but I did want to add those in because the rating was higher than the larger categories that I had reported earlier. So I felt that they were important. Balance, mindfulness, and wellness. That is the next thought, next theme with the 16 thoughts. Children should get basic education about brain starting in the elementary school as a building block to later lessons on mental health in addition. This is something that we definitely agree with, and wellness is working on that wellness committee. I think a holistic approach to education is vital for empowering children and helping to reinforce the foundation of being human. We need to allow more sleep at the high school level. Definitely.
National topic right now.
Parents, teachers, all around.
You're talking about for parents or students.
Let's see, the next theme, increased recess and activities, and there were 8 thoughts for 3.6 stars. Consider allowing all elementary school kids outside twice per day. if we can figure that out. That would be great. The physical activity should be a priority for younger children along with academic activity. Institute a go outside policy in elementary school like they do in Chicago, Norway, and colder countries.
That was the second.
Go outside?
Well,
You knew we were
second
gonna
highest
ask.
rated category.
Yeah,
What is the go outside policy?
yeah.
That you go out in every weather.
Yes.
In every weather, right,
Oh,
exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
Just push them out.
And they
Yeah.
keep the windows open sometimes in those colder climates too, right?
Yeah.
Keep them awake.
And the last theme, again, there were only 5 thoughts, but this had the highest rating, 3.8 stars, so I felt that it was important to add this in. Essay around anti-bullying needs to begin in kindergarten. Vulnerable students need to see it modeled and how to respond. Bystander behavior needs to be taught. There is still bullying related to differences. I would like to see a very straightforward approach to defeating this, including offenders' parents. I feel the district does not do enough for students that are socially, emotionally delayed. These students are teased and excluded by other students. So I shared all these thoughts because I thought that was very important in terms of how we move forward, because majority of the participants were, I believe 85% of the participants were parents of children who currently are attending schools. And then the rest were a mix of those who have graduated, some don't have any kids, and then I think a handful of teachers, and one was other category.
Julia, can you
Yes.
tell with these bullying comments, clearly the first one talks about kindergarten, but with the other two, do you know how old the parents' kids were?
I would have to go back and take a look
Just
and
curious
see,
where
yeah,
they
the
think the
demographic.
bullying is
Yeah, I think we
happening.
could filter
Yeah, we
it by
probably could.
demographic to at least
Yeah.
get elementary, middle school, high school.
But I also,
There's a lower
A place where
elementary. Yeah.
parents think more bullying is going on.
I also feel that there's been a lot of emphasis on behavior, bystander behavior in our curriculum, going back a long way.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, somebody obviously feels there's nothing, but that's not really true.
And it could be, I mean, something like this, if it's a kindergarten parent, it's their first
Mhm.
experience with the
Yeah.
district.
Yeah,
They may not
true
have
enough.
had it.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we always have to keep ourselves attuned to, even in the schools. We have almost, to a degree, a new crop of parents. you
Every
know,
year.
Every year.
Yeah.
And, you know, the middle school, complete turnover theoretically, obviously got siblings, but theoretically, you've got a complete turnover in student body every 3 years, high school every 4. So we always have to keep renewing those kinds of efforts. To your point, we've been doing it for years, but new group of kids, new group of parents,
Yeah.
new efforts have to keep going on.
And bullying was so talked about like a decade ago, right?
Right.
So I
That's what
wonder
I'm
if there
saying.
was some let up over that, you know, it's like we've done this, I don't know how continual that education has been, or if it's been called other things.
Mhm.
I think our principals, especially at the elementary and the middle school in particular, do a really direct and pretty consistent job of dealing with bullying. Education, you know, proactively, and of course then dealing with it on a case-by-case basis too, bringing in psychologists, teachers. So I do think it's still a very present piece in our curriculum.
A lot happens, I think, on the playgrounds, it's like the loose
Oh,
time in elementary school in particular.
I'm very thankful we don't have school buses, because that's the other place.
That's
it
the other
happens.
place where it
And
happens.
social media as well, so that's
Yes,
why.
at the secondary level in
Yeah.
particular, you're right,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of the focus becomes secondary.
And how similar is this feedback to what we received through the strategic planning process on this
I think it was
topic?
pretty much
think
right
it's-
on point with
Yeah.
the same
Similar.
things.
I think so too.
Yeah, and I've seen that both with authentic learning when we did that, as well as this. I think there's definitely alignment in thinking, which tells me that we were definitely, the strategic planning committees definitely found the right areas of
Yes,
focus.
yeah, definitely the highlights were also
Oh,
a
yeah.
big part of the surveys early on.
And I think you could also see the connection when you're looking at the last strategic plan to the new one, because the last one really talked about the networks of supports pillar and the social emotional development pillar, which when you look at how the theme of Whole Child came about, those two are actually part of, and why we decided to call it the Whole Child, because we are looking at all the different supports, and we're also looking at making sure that we're providing the level of social emotional learning that is required at this point. And I think a lot of things have changed over the years because, back when we were in school, it was really more academically focused. But with the society changing, with the technology, kids are getting information at all times. And, whether it's positive or negative, it's impacting them. And so we really have to not only look at academic supports, but really the social emotional well-being of our kids. So that's I wanted to show the connection from the last strategic plan to the current strategic plan. So the networks of supports and the social emotional development comes together into the whole child goal. Okay. So what is whole child? So the way we defined it is the whole child goal says deepen our systemic, academic, and social emotional supports for the health, safety, and well-being of the whole child, recognizing that our learners need to balance academic, physical, social, and emotional demands. So it really, the whole child goal addresses the students' need for a healthy, safe, engaging, and challenging learning environment. And it's really not so much about just what we're providing at this point during the K-12 school years, but it really is about long-term. And so when we're looking at, when we're measuring our success, we're not just looking at our students' grades or what college they get into or what our SAT, ACT, AP scores are, but we're really looking at, okay, are our kids leaving us and becoming adults that are happy and well-rounded and kids who are well-equipped to really meaningfully participate and contribute to the global society. I wanted to go over a little bit of the research. As all of us, we were teachers at one point, the administrators, and we have always known that for students to be available to learn in the classroom, the teacher has to develop a learning environment that is safe, where the students feel like they can ask questions and they can make comments. And as individual teachers, we all know that, and we do our best to provide the environment. But kids don't all come to us always available. And they could be carrying a lot of different things. They are dealing with social interaction issues. They might be having some difficulty at home. But whatever it is, we have to make sure that we are addressing not only just providing the learning, but also making sure that if the child does not seem to be in the right place or right frame of mind, then we're going to figure out how do we help them. How do we proactively teach skills so that if they are in a certain situation that they could still come into the classroom and say, okay, I'm in algebra right now, I need to set that aside and I need to focus. But that doesn't just occur for kids. It has to be something that is specifically taught, and I think even with adults, you have to constantly remind yourself, when you're in meeting, but you just, let's say, got into an accident on your way because you were running late to a meeting. You got to be able to separate that, and so those are specific skills that we want to teach. Research, as you can read, those are just summaries of some of the research that I was able to get. It shows that explicitly teaching these skills to be self-aware, to self-regulate, and having interpersonal skills and being able to make responsible decisions, those are very specific skills that we have to teach. And when you teach them, you can see a significant improvement in both academics and overall wellness of students. I want to share with you some data on mental health of the current youth. This is something that I came across. We use cognitive behavioral consultants out of White Plains for our DBT program, and through their training, they do share a lot of data. And this is one data that I got permission from them to share. And basically, what this is saying is at any point, 25% of children and adolescents suffer from some sort of an anxiety disorder, which is very alarming. When you're looking at kids that may have, it says a little over 8% suffer from phobias, a little less than 7% suffer from social anxiety disorder. There's post-traumatic stress disorder, general anxiety, panic disorder. There's a lot that's going on in the world, and again, in this world, we're constantly connected to everything and every single piece of news that's out there. You're constantly connected to your friends, to your frenemies, whatever you want to call them. You're constantly getting information, and you have to know how to block certain things out, and we've got to teach them.
Do you have this information broken down by socioeconomic and other factors?
This particular, I don't. But I could find out where they got that information.
It's an
Find
interesting,
that out for you.
it's an interesting,
There was an interesting piece of information kind of related to that, and I can't remember if Steve was the one that brought it up. Can't remember where it came from, but there's some reports now that have identified students in high-achieving districts as a new at-risk group.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I bet you
Because of this.
these ratios are much different.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was brought up at
That's
the
a
Pulling
national.
Together presentation of our
Dr.
data as
Yes,
well.
yes, that's
We've
where
seen
it
it
was.
twice,
Yeah.
once there and another place.
It's in the top three,
Yeah.
At-risk
high
groups.
stress
Yeah,
stressors.
yeah.
Yeah, there was an article, it was the New York Times, I think, recently.
Yes.
Right, and it
Yes.
said that, the new high-risk group are
Mhm.
affluent students
Students.
that look a lot like ours.
At risk for stress.
At risk for, yes,
Anxiety.
anxiety, mental health issues.
Well, which is also why Pelham Together
Yeah.
went and used the
Mhm.
high achieving
Right.
schools survey to specifically study that group of students. And I do have a couple of slides from that report as well. But I wanted to start more nationally and give you the statistics nationally, and then we'll come down to the Pelham statistics. So I also looked at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention website. They have, there are a lot of organizations that are out there that are doing studies constantly. And this one that I found, which is a result of a 10-year study from 2007 to 2017, this talks about high school students across the country that have persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. And it has gone up in the 10 years from 2007 to 2017, from 28.5 to 31.5%. Students who seriously consider attempting suicide has gone up from 14.5 to 17.2. And in both cases, the number of female students almost double the male students. The next one is from, I also reviewed a 2018 report of the National Survey on Drug Use and Health conducted by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And what this graph shows, I chose a couple of different data points from that particular report. And one area is this rate of major depressive episodes reported by various age groups. If you see, there are 4 sets of graphs. The first one is ages 12 to 17. The second one is 18 to 25. The third is 26 to 49. And the last is 50 or older. So major depressive episodes is defined as a period of at least 2 weeks when a person experiences a depressed mood or loss of interest or pleasure in daily activities, and had a majority of specified symptoms such as problems with sleep, eating, energy, concentration, or self-worth. And this table is reported from 2015 to 2018. And as you can see, the first graph is 12 to 17. It has gone up. The age group of 18 to 25 has also gone up quite a bit. And the older group, the 26 to 49, not as much, and you're safe if you're 50 and over.
Something
But,
good is
yeah.
starting to happen there.
But
2016 might have
But as you're looking at this, it is, especially the group the post-high school group is very alarming because, that's when they're away from home and they're really making their own decisions. And we want to make sure that we equip them with the right, skills and the decision-making skills. So let's see, let me go to the next graph. So the next one is about people that have experienced serious mental illness. And so this is also from the same report. And there are 3 age groups here, 18 to 25, 26 to 49, and 50 and over. So any mental illness is defined as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder, which can vary in impact ranging from no impairment to mild, moderate, or even severe impairment. Those with severe impairment would be then considered having serious mental illness. So that's what the graph is, which is defined as mental, behavioral, or emotional disorders resulting in serious functional impairment, which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. So if you look at this graph, red bar, the red line is the age group of 18 to 25, which is the highest, and there's been a highest increase. And then the next line is age 26 to 49, and again, the green line is 50 and over. Boy, this is serious stuff at this time of the night, I apologize. Let's see. And then there's one more that I wanted to share with you from that particular report, which has to do with co-occurring issues. So, it's really important to note that substance use is also related to the mental illness, and this data shows that it's more frequent among adults age 18 and over. So when you look at the 3 bars, the red bar is no mental illness and substance use. Blue is any, so which is the lower severity. And then green is serious mental illness. And so when you see, especially when it comes to, the 3 categories are cigarette usage, daily cigarette, and binge drinking, those who have a mental illness, the serious mental illness, tend to have more substance use as well. Okay, so the next 2 graphs I have from the HAAS survey, the High Achieving School survey, and this is very specific to Pelham as it compares to nationally as well as the rest of the HAAS peers. And so this is 30-day use rates comparing Pelham to national and HAAS peers. Blue is Pelham, orange is national, and other high achieving schools is gray. There are 5 categories: alcohol, binge drinking, marijuana, vaping, and vaping marijuana. So HAAS survey was given to our 8th, 10th, and 12th grade students last year. And as you can see, if you look at Pelham, the blue bars, they are lower for every category than the HAAS peers, which is great. Mm-hmm. But in 3 of the 5 categories, we are higher than national average. So that will be the alcohol, the binge drinking, and the vaping marijuana. And then the next graph is, I took the top reasons for substance abuse for Pelham teens. And when you look at this, the blue is, these are the different reasons for substance abuse or substance use. And the blue represents to relieve stress, and gray represents to socialize. So what this is telling us is the 2 largest sections of these different bars, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, well, marijuana to sleep is a little bit bigger than the gray, but vaping, the blue and the gray kind of dominate. And those are to relieve stress and to socialize. And so when you're looking at this, what we really want to do is we really want to make sure that we are helping our kids and teaching the skills to self-regulate, to really make responsible decisions. And to socialize, they have to be under the influence to socialize. That is so, difficult for us to, as adults, to kind of swallow. And, we want to teach them skills so that they can have interpersonal skills and they can make friends, and so they don't feel like they have to be under the influence before they go somewhere to hang out with their friends. Now, for the complete survey, for those who may not be aware, the complete results is on the Pelham Together website, I believe. So you can read through the entire report. Okay. So, our whole child goal, which I defined earlier, has 2 action steps. The first one is the Healthy Environment Action Step, where what we want to do is research and identify a clear vision for what constitutes a healthy environment for Pelham Public Schools. I think, given the fact that our students are spending at least 7 hours a day with us for 183 days a year, we want to make sure that we are providing a healthy environment for our students, and we want to define what that is for us, and we want to measure and we want to see how we measure up to the definition once we define it. And then we'll have to determine what the next steps are going to be. And this particular action step will be addressed by the district's wellness committee. We already met 2 weeks ago, and so we're starting to work in addressing this action step. The second action step is really looking at the multi-tier systems of supports, which is really tiers of intervention for students. So what we want to do is develop district-wide committees to create a shared framework and identify approaches to providing equitable access to academic and social and emotional supports to all of our students. We have already formed a K-5 and a 6-12 MTSS committees. And we already met, the K-5 met last week, the 6-12 met this week. Our goal for the next meeting is to be trained by Mr. Jim Wright. I don't know if you remember, but Mr. Jim Wright was with us last June. We kind of started, our leadership team got trained by Mr. Jim Wright. He was here in June. He was also back in August. And then now we're moving forward with him coming back to work with our district-wide MTSS team as well as our building-level MTSS teams. And just define a little bit more what MTSS is for the public. So MTSS is very similar. I think majority of us are probably familiar with response to intervention, which has been in place for many years. We've been providing intervention for many years. But what MTSS we're doing is now we're working under that, functioning under that umbrella, where we're not only recognizing the academic intervention that's necessary, but also how do we help our students that may have some behavioral challenges due to social emotional needs. So we're now putting both together under the MTSS umbrella. And just to give you a sense of what those tiers are. So when you look at this triangle, you'll see the academic on the left side. On the right side of the triangle, we have behavioral and social emotional needs. And so the 3 tiers, when you're looking at it, the green part, so typically when you're looking at a group of students, 80% of the students will learn the grade level curriculum as it is taught within the classroom with the whatever differentiation that is provided by the general education teacher. And then there's at-risk students that are the next 15% that may need a little more support, where they may have some gaps. And so what you would want to do is you want to pull out small groups of those students to provide additional support to really address those gaps. And then the third tier is just 5% of those students who may not have responded to the tier 2, where they have even more gaps and they may require more frequent or longer periods of intervention. And what happens is when students are not responding to each of these tiers as we move up, at some point we would have to consider, okay, does the student have a disability? So we would have to make a referral to the Committee on Special Education and go through a comprehensive testing to see if the student requires services.
Julia, I know
Yes.
all students have differing needs and reasons to bring them to the committee.
Yes.
But what might the time frame look like where the interventions would be tried over how many months before you got to that?
Right.
The top of the triangle.
So typically when a classroom teacher is finding that a student is just below where they should be, then they might be utilizing some of the EI block that we have in our schedule to maybe work in small groups or individually, but that's within the classroom, which is your tier 1, and you would try that about 6 to 8 weeks. And then if that is not really if the student is still not making progress, then what you would do is you would then make a referral to the to tier 2, but we would have to come up with some benchmarks as to when we would require the student to get the support. And so we have to look at different data points. Actually, I'm going to be asking Dr. Callahan and Dr. Thompson to speak a little more about the work that we did over the summer. But just to summarize, we're looking at different data points, whether it is, like we currently use AIMSweb, which is a universal screening tool, and we do that 3 times a year. And so we would look at that result, we would look at like the DRA or BAS, which is the reading assessment, to see where they fall. And so we look at different points of data, figure out, if the student requires that level, and we would have to determine based on individual students, but typically you would be providing the service from 6 to 8 weeks. And then you would kind of have a target on where you want that student to be. And then we would have to see, we would have to measure the progress, see where the student is, and sometimes the student may come back to the classroom and join the rest of the group, and sometimes you may have to continue with the next target. So it depends on what the issue is, it depends on, what the gaps are. Some students may have both reading and math gaps, some students may only have math. So it depends, but typically we would look at it for about 8 weeks or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question too, but I'm not sure if I should wait until the total end, but when you keep talking about the teams that do this assessment, can you describe what those teams consist of, like at the different levels, like at an elementary school level versus a middle school level versus a high school level, like?
The teams that do the assessment, or are you talking about the MTSS team?
Well, I guess I'm not quite sure if they're the same thing or they're different things. I'm
Okay.
trying to understand the assessment. Is it fully relying on the classroom teacher to assess the students, or like, and is that the same way all the way through an education process, or is it different at elementary level versus high school level? Like and when you say 80% of the students receive the universal core instruction, or 80%, is that to say that 80% of our students are in this universal core instruction?
That is what they're getting every single day. That's your regular classroom instruction. No, 100% of our students are getting regular classroom instruction. But during those, out of those students who are in receiving instruction, not all students are going to understand everything as it is taught.
But this
Right.
is just a diagram. We're not saying that 80% of our students don't need intervention.
Right, it's a guide.
It's a guide of
Yes,
how this
yes,
works.
yes.
Yeah, and the theory behind it really is that 80% of the students will get what they need just from good core instruction.
But I guess,
And
so
won't need
related to that,
additions.
how do we know that? We know that from this AIMSweb thing that you're talking about, and the
No,
assessment?
this is a nationally gathered, this is, MTSS is it's not really a program, but it is guidance that has been determined based on data that's collected where, kids are going to learn based on regular research-based instruction that you're providing in the classroom. That out of, all the kids that are in the classroom, most likely 80% will be okay with your general education classroom instruction as you're giving it.
Right.
But then there will be a small percentage of those kids that are going to need additional support, and they're not going to catch everything that is being taught.
Okay, no, I understand that now. I guess
Okay.
my question then is, how do we identify? Like and how do we do that for an elementary student? How do we do
Right.
that for a middle school student? How do we do that?
So we have been using, the guidance is that you should be using some sort of a screener, universal screener. And the universal screening, there are many different types of screening tools out there, and different districts use something different. The state's website actually gives you some guidance as to what are most scientifically proven and all of that, and what will give you different types of data. What we have adopted over the years is AIMSweb. AIMSweb is just the name of a company that provides this universal testing that we do, which yes, which they'll speak to. But we have that as one data point, and we give that to students up to 8th grade, K through 8. But in terms of the difference between elementary versus middle versus high school, because developmentally we're looking at different types of gaps. K-5, we're looking at the universal screening, we're looking at, there's also a reading assessment that we give to our students, and we actually have points throughout the year where the teachers actually do that assessment with a student to measure progress. And so we use that as another data point. And of course, teachers are assessing every day. And so there's also teacher recommendation or teacher observation as to whether the student needs additional support. So you're not just looking at one thing, we're looking at more of a comprehensive look at who should be receiving different tiers of services. And right now, what has been happened, I think, in the past is that every building kind of made those decisions within the building. And what we're trying to do with the district-wide MTSS committee is to have the same criteria across all 4 elementary schools. And that's kind of the purpose of having the district-wide MTSS committee, so that we can come up with, okay, this is what we've been using previously, but moving forward, do we want to use maybe a different evaluation or a different tool to use as one of the data points to determine whether they should be receiving tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 services? So that is to be determined, but we have been using different data points.
So I have a question, because it sounds like what you've been talking about is on the academic side.
Yes.
Of this pyramid. But are there those kinds of assessments done, regular assessments done on behavior and social or emotional health? Or those more
that is to come.
episodic?
That is to come. We haven't quite, yes, that's what we're going to be working on, and that's what we're adding on to the tiers of intervention.
An assessment, or just a way of capturing children that might capture them?
Yes and yes. We have to consider all of that within these committees to really look at what's out there, what can we use, what makes most sense for our district. But we have to also think about what program are we going to use first before we can start doing that. So all of that's going to be determined in the committee work that we do this year.
Okay, I just want to ask one more question.
Yes.
Sorry. But when you keep saying we, the people assessing, it's mostly the teacher.
So yes, it's the classroom teacher.
But there is other people in the schools that are also helping.
The interventionists. So elementary schools have interventionist positions where we have figured out, so last year we added an interventionist.
So does that interventionist, I'm just trying to understand,
Yes.
how it works. I'm a kid in elementary school and I'm doing my little Ames web thing. Am I just my teacher is there with me, but maybe this intervention is in there sometimes too? Or
For the actual assessment?
To evaluate.
All the students do Ames Web, correct? Like the whole class does
I'm
it.
being evaluated and I'm with my teacher, but does somebody else also review the result, or someone else there watching the experience? How does that?
It depends on level. Excuse me, microphone, please.
Sure. Sorry.
Thompson,
It really does not.
You don't have to state your name and address, though.
So it really depends on level. So some of these universal screeners, like the Ames Web, are more difficult to administer with younger kids.
Okay.
Who there may or may not be a technology component very, very early on to Ames Web. So pretty much what we do is we create these teams for the early elementary grades, and the teams are made up of the interventionists that actually go from school to school to get it done as efficiently as possible with some of the younger grades. As you get into some of the older grades, like middle school, for example, it's almost all technology-based and done totally by the classroom teacher. So early elementary, we put together teams that move among the buildings to help the general classroom teacher administer the universal screeners. And then as the students get older, really the technology does most of the work with the classroom teacher.
But I think part of what you're also getting at, or maybe not, is the MTSS team is a group of people, I'm assuming the psychologist, the teacher comes to a team to present their concerns about a particular student. So all the students get this Ames Web test in X grade. The results come out, certain kids are meeting the benchmarks. Other things are seen as shortcomings in terms of the student's achievement, in terms of not being able to turn homework, whatever it is. The teacher can bring the student as a case to the MTSS team. So who is on that team?
Right.
Is it? Oh, sorry, Meg.
The MTSS team, we have the administrator is there. The school psychologist is the facilitator of the meeting.
You got it.
The resource room teacher in each building is also part of the team, and they are also responsible for taking minutes at the meeting.
Okay.
And then we have any other service provider that can give us input into what the needs are. So let's say the child has a reading need, we may invite the interventionist or the reading specialist to attend the meeting. If there's a language need, then we'll also invite the speech therapist. So there's a core team, and that's usually the administrator, the resource room teacher, and the psychologist, and then other related service providers are invited as needed.
So, that's great, but that sounds like you've already established that the student
Every school
has,
has an established team.
but the student has needs and that are already being met by other groups. Like, I guess I'm trying to understand the identification and like how.
So a child sitting in a general education classroom receiving this core instruction, the teacher's giving the core instruction, but she also may be differentiating because that's part of the core instruction. So the child could be struggling in the classroom, but maybe it's not at the level where they need this extra support service, or what we're calling the tier 2. So they're not at risk, but we know developmentally, because of the way children learn, they all learn at different levels. So it's always working with different levels of students in the class. So after these assessments, each school has data meetings, and each teacher is invited to sit with the MTSS team, the core team, and talk about the needs of students.
Okay.
But at any point during the year, so we have the data meetings just to make sure we don't miss anyone, and that the teachers have an opportunity to look at their class as a whole and really start to talk about the needs of the class and individual students. But at any point during the year, a teacher can schedule an MTSS meeting, which would be to look at another level of support, tier 2.
I see.
So the child could not be currently getting reading support or support with language, but if the teacher usually lets us know what the need is, what her concern is with the student prior to the meeting, so we can invite the specialist to the meeting to talk about the student, to see what tier 1 interventions have been in place, and then to see if, once we look at all the data points, should we provide an extra layer of support, which is at tier 2.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sorry.
All right, that's very good questions.
Yeah, that's what work sessions are for.
Brings it to life.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to your point in terms of social emotional learning. So our goal is to come up with some sort of a universal program, because every school is kind of they're doing a lot. There are a lot of pockets of great work that's being done, but there hasn't been as much consistency as we would like. And so what we're trying to do is really have, we want to adopt a universal program for K-5 and possibly one for 6-12 to support the emotional learning. And actually, we have identified something, because this was something that's been in the works from the previous strategic plan. They had looked and they had discussed responsive classroom being something that they want to use in the K-5 program, which we actually will talk a little bit more about later on. But we have already identified the program for K-5, and our teachers have already started. We have a board of teachers that have already gotten trained. They're in the middle of the training. We're going to be identifying the next group of students teachers that are going to be trained, so that we are in the works in terms of providing the universal support for social emotional learning. Yes.
So does that mean you're going to have a similar screening process for identifying students that have behavioral, social, emotional needs, deficits, however you want to?
So I'm not sure what that's going to look like. That's going to be part of our work.
Okay, you told me that already.
That's why we have
You said that already.
Mr. Jim Wright coming to train us on how to best form our own plan that's going to work for our district based on our needs.
I mean, just intuitively, it seems easier to identify academic.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that plan would be structured differently, like K-5 to middle school, you're saying, because you're thinking about different things that affect those students potentially.
Right. So responsive classroom goes up to 8. It's a K-8 program. We definitely have decided on that program for K-5. We're still figuring out whether we want to utilize that, or if you want to go to a different, because there are a couple of other social emotional learning curriculums that are out there that are very research-based and very popular among a lot of similar districts to us. And so we're going to be looking at our options this year. So in terms of looking at this long-term for the next 5 years, initially when we developed this, when we developed the action plans, it really was just for the first 18 months. But looking at the 5 years in terms of going back to the healthy environment action step, we want to make sure we can define what it is this year. We want to look at where are we in terms of what we decided the definition is going to be and what our vision is for healthy environment in the Pelham Public Schools. And then we need to identify, is there a program that we need to bring in? Or are there trainings that are involved? So we're gonna have to determine that, and that's gonna be part of the process for the next, couple of years. And then we're gonna have to implement, we're gonna have to train, and then we're gonna have to reassess. So that's gonna be the process for the next 5 years in terms of MTSS. Also, we're gonna be in a similar cycle where we're going to identify, we're getting all the training this year, we're gonna have to identify, we have already identified for elementary what we're doing, but secondary, we need to identify which program we're gonna bring in for the social emotional learning. And academically, we are working on that as well. We have to see what we currently have, what are some opportunities that we see to improve what we currently have. And then we're gonna have to write a plan, and then we're gonna revisit it. And I hope to do this annually because as needs change, I want to make sure that we're always tweaking to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the different cohort of students that are coming up.
Julia?
Yes.
So I know we've talked about some different possibilities for a plan for secondary school.
Yes.
Do you have any data from schools that have used responsive classroom and used it through 8th grade and then adopted something else in high school? Do we know any districts who have done that? What it is they've
Not
chosen?
specifically, no.
I'm just curious if there's something that other districts think dovetails well with a follow-up for
Yeah.
responsive classroom.
I don't.
I know Julia was just talking today with the high school, the secondary MTSS team about trying to do some site visits
Yeah.
to see what some of the secondary programs are like. I think that's a good follow-up question with that. What are good secondary programs and how do they mesh with
Right.
something like responsive
Where
classroom?
would those be?
Yeah.
Are they in other HAS or in different types of environments?
Both. Oh, I think
We've
that's a
been
sign.
sitting still too long.
Yep. That's a
Someone's
sign.
trying to tell
Not
us
enough
something.
movement.
That's never happened
Physical
before.
activity, very important.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple major programmatic secondary programs or K-12 programs. So that's really kind of what the committee's going to be doing is a little bit of fact-finding and seeing that. And it could be too, like with many programs, often finding that right fit for you depends on how you decide to adapt it. So, one district may decide to do one program K-12, another may decide we're only going to do it 6-12, we're going to do something different K-5. How do we then create a crosswalk so we marry the two programs together in a way that works? Yeah, and exactly, to map out how are you going to transition from the language and skills and strategies at this level to the language and skills and strategies at this level so that we can build common knowledge, common language, common approaches. So that is exactly part of the work that the district-wide MTSS teams are going to be doing this year, in addition to looking at data.
And as you look at programs, I wonder if there's then some overlaps with the other part of the strategic plan with authentic learning, with the use of
Definitely.
time, right? Because especially at the middle school and high school, or especially at the high school, like where is their time? I think we've all realized that
And that's, I think, one of the biggest connections is this work doesn't get done in 41 minutes, in 9
Yeah.
periods.
I think I have a question related to that. When you talk about the SEL programs, am I using the right term here? Social
Yes.
emotional learning,
Good
yeah?
job.
All right.
Good job.
When you talk about those programs, it's an academic program. You're teaching those skills, or is it just
There's
a
a
review
curriculum.
program?
Depending on the program, certain programs have curriculum, so like Universal DBT, that's something that some of the districts are using, and that actually it's like 30 different lessons. So it's not a daily curriculum
But
that you
it's
would
filtered in.
create, but it could be embedded into one of the existing classes.
So it's maybe both a curriculum and a technique for engaging students through all coursework?
So it can be. The universal DBT is really more skills-based, so we're
Okay.
teaching skills. Responsive classroom is actually more of an interaction and creating an environment for students, and I think developmentally, that probably makes more sense too. So we'll talk a little more about responsive classroom, but it can be both.
So would you say that this SEL, the way that we're looking at SEL is sort of new? This is a new way that we're approaching it, or have we always had this embedded in our curriculum, or always had a method of teaching this?
I think some of the elementary schools, they've done some different things. Like middle school has also done PBIS, which is positive behavior.
Intervention system.
Intervention, yes. Intervention
Support.
systems. So like different schools have done different things, and right now what we're trying to do
That's what
is
you're
we're trying
talking
to make
about,
it more
trying
consistent.
to come up with the best options and
Yeah.
use them everywhere, because
Right.
that's what we want to do.
Yep.
It does seem to, in reflecting back on the data that Julia shared, I think many schools have come to a place of being much more explicit and direct about teaching to the social emotional side, because of all that data that's happening and just the way the kids are different, the way the world is changing, and just greater needs being identified early on.
I mean, when you look back at the beginning of your presentation and we're talking about all this data, like it seems like you need to talk about it. Like the worst thing is for us to be sitting up here talking about it and the students not knowing it themselves. So it just seems like.
Yep.
I gave you access. Thank you.
So what happened?
Certainly at the elementary level, this is like what you would call like preventative work, right? I mean, when you have psychologists or school counselors at the elementary school, you have the ability to go into the classroom and teach skills that give students like the cushion so that maybe they never get anxious by the time, or like unreasonably anxious by the time they get to middle school or high school.
Or if you've
or
already
they know how to
talked
deal
about
with stress.
strategies, like
Yeah.
when they identify that they're stressed, they're like, oh, but we learned how to deal with this before, and like it doesn't ever reach that level potentially. or something.
Yeah. And then as you roll it up to the more challenging times in middle school and high school, you can have the skill set, I guess, to address those issues.
Thanks.
That's a little bit what I was thinking about with the transition, that if we have success with
Mhm.
responsive classroom and building a climate of acceptance and openness with the kids, starting in kindergarten, by the time they get to middle school, hopefully they're better equipped and prepared, and maybe will need less intervention. So I think that's the hope, part of the hope in starting early, and it's a protective factor moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, so like I had mentioned before, we've done some work, and Dr. Callahan and Dr. Thompson are going to speak a little bit to the work in the K-5 schools that we've done over the summer, in the spring, and then also in the fall to kind of prepare for this year.
So we spoke quite a bit last year about our academic and social emotional interventions, and we started the research process. So we decided as a leadership team that we needed to take a very hard look, a concerted look at our data at the end of last school year to make predictions for the fall and some determinations as to who we thought would need K-8 extra support beyond the general classroom instruction and the differentiation that goes on in the classroom. So in order to do that, we had to pull all the data that exists from various resources and put it together to look at our children. And we actually did it K through 8 with the principals, with Dr. Garcia and with Julia. So we wanted to just talk quickly about what that data included, and then some of the thoughts on where we need to go.
So to follow up on some of the points and questions that Ms. Young asked about earlier, our job really, a big part of it in this area is to collect data and really get it into the hands of those MTSS teams at the buildings so they can make the best possible decisions about how best to support our kids. So on on the math side of things, we really look 3 through 8 at state testing data in math. We get cut scores from the state, both in math and ELA, and the state says if a student is below this particular cut score, you need to look at them for intervention services. So we take that data. We also take our universal screening data that was mentioned earlier, AIMSweb. There's a math component and an ELA component. We administer AIMSweb 3 times a year, once in the fall, once in the winter, once in the spring. And as I mentioned, both in math and ELA, we look at standards-based report cards on the math side of things. And we also, in some of the work we did in the summer, was coordinating that work with teacher recommendations for support services as well. So we take all of those data points and we try to get that information into the hands of those MTSS teams at all the buildings. There are similar processes in place, both in math and ELA, also for some of the Regents classes too. And on the math side, we do this with some of our math supports in the high school, which includes the seminar classes for algebra. So I'll turn it back over to Maria. She'll talk about the ELA a little bit.
So AIMSweb is computer-based, as Dr. Callahan explained, but the K-1 experience is very different and has a slightly different focus. Obviously, as the students are just learning about their letters and sounds and just learning how to read. When a student gets to 2nd grade, and this is really from 2nd grade through 8th grade, our AIMSweb screener looks at reading comprehension, silent reading fluency, and vocabulary. And math has components as well, and we are given a composite score. And that composite score can be turned into a percentage, which we do, and it tells us how a student does in comparison to national norms, state norms, and we can also see students compared in our own district. So we use AIMS as that screener. In ELA, there is, it's very important though to use a reading assessment that's administered by the classroom teacher. Not only to get what we would consider to be a more accurate, real-time understanding of a student's instructional reading level, but also it's used as a point of information for that classroom teachers. It gives them a much more in-depth understanding for their instruction so they can apply what they learn to their instruction. So we have been using what's called the DRA, Developmental Reading Assessment, for a very long time in the district. And we made a decision over the last couple of years to switch to a different reading assessment based upon research, based upon what we saw other districts doing that are like our district. The new reading assessment is put out by Fontes and Pinnell, who are sort of the gurus in the continuum of literacy and looking at how students learn to read and write. And it's called the benchmark assessment system. So we have been transitioning to the benchmark assessment system over the past 2 years, and that assessment system gives our classroom teachers quite a bit of information about a student's reading level. So their independent reading level, their instructional reading level, and also a challenge level to push students forward. So we also look at that point of data when we're determining if a student is in need of extra intervention beyond general classroom instruction. So we looked at those scores from the spring, and we met as a team with the building principals and discussed our numbers, basically. So how many students in each of the buildings did we see showing a need, approaching grade level standards or below grade level standards based on the data that we had.
So you would think in this day and age that this would be really, really easy to do in some sort of data warehousing system. But believe it or not, these systems currently do not speak very well with each other. So our Ames web data is when we want to download it, we get a PDF. So PDF can't be manipulated. So we actually have to create a file and kind of pull it into Excel. So we take the PDF file from the Ames web data, we take the state data, we take report card data, and we put it all together on a spreadsheet. And we did that this summer and basically color-coded all of that data so that when we gave the data to the MTSS teams, they could see which data points indicated that students were in need of help. So typically, that process traditionally has taken a lot longer, and Maria and I would spend several weeks trying to aggregate that data and get it prepared for the MTSS teams. What we're looking to do is streamline that process and make it more efficient and fast, so that we can use it to make decisions more efficiently and quickly. A part of that is we just recently started getting the results back from our fall administrations and updating those placements that we made from the spring administrations to to revisit some of the placements and make sure we're supporting the kids that need it the most based on as many data points as we have. We also, in addition to using kind of those screening data points, the state testing data points, we also put into the spreadsheet where teacher recommendations aligned to what the testing data was telling us. So we color-coded that as well. And from that data, we took a few additional steps that Maria will talk about.
Can I ask a question? And at what point in time do you get the parents involved of these children?
Great question.
You know, because you're talking about all these different processes and you're going from here to here to here. At what point in time you put a call out and say, hey, by the way, we've been doing certain testing of your child and this is what we've noticed, but we're gonna do a little more testing and then we'll come back to you? I mean, where is that point of notification and game plan?
So after the initial assessment, if teachers, let me backtrack. When we're doing the core instruction and kids are struggling, teachers are communicating with parents. They're letting them know what they're working on in the classroom before it even gets to the level of sitting at a formal MTSS meeting. The assessments that follow, and as Maria and Tom shared, we just finished them now. Our data meetings actually start in 2 weeks where we're going through the roundup on data that we just collected. Parents are notified if their children certainly fall below the percentile, if they're receiving tier 1 in the classroom, and more formally if they're moving to tier 2. So besides calling the parent, we send a letter home that talks about what the goals are, what the duration and frequency would be of the service that they're going to receive. And then the service provider follows up with a phone call just to introduce themselves to the parents and talk a little bit about what the small group would look like. So that happens continually, obviously with report cards in between. There's additional communication. And even if a child's moving from tier 2 to tier 3, or it's RTI has worked or MTSS has worked and it's been a success and students are being exited, parents are notified of that as well. So it is continual, more formal when you get into the tier 2 and tier 3 levels, but at tier 1, teachers are expected to reach out and talk a little bit about what they're doing in the classroom and of course what they can do to support students at home.
So the other thing to note is that these services are fluid. And that really is a philosophy that we're taking a hard look at. It's a shift. That if a student is given, for example, reading support, we should be progress monitoring, reassessing, and if we see improvement, that student can exit out. And obviously, the classroom teacher would be watching and making sure that student kept moving forward. MTSS academic supports should be fluid. And if a student is not making progress and our progress monitoring is not picking up that progress, then that student would move up the pyramid, go all the way perhaps to tier 3, which is more one-on-one instruction with an interventionist. So with all of this data, we were able, the Board of Ed allowed the district to hire a new interventionist, an additional interventionist based upon the need. And so we were able to take a look
over the summer at where that intervention should be placed based on student need. And we also, spent quite a bit of time talking about the forms, the letters. I mean, this is a process, and I think Julia will probably wrap that up at the end. This is the beginning of a process in the sense that we're trying to create consistency. So these things have been happening. RTI has been happening, but as we researched over the last couple of years, we saw that there lacked a consistency across schools and also K-12. So our forms that we're using right now might not be the same forms that we use once the MTSS group continues to meet and talks about what's best and most efficient. So, I think for the teachers, they're very excited about this. They want to see this obviously move forward. And obviously interventionists and the administrative team, our goal is always to support students as best we can. So there are a lot of tools out there that we're going to look at, a lot of different research-based programs that could be used in the academic side by interventionists that we also are going to look at. Some things will change and some won't. Perhaps we feel confident about some of our choices that we've made over the last couple of years.
I have a question. Do you have any concerns, or do you see there could be potentially a trend for pushing kids faster into Tier 2 services and relying less on differentiated instruction? Do you see that as a potential effect of this program?
Actually, I think we would hope not. The ultimate goal of every district, and obviously Pelham most importantly, is that we have solid, effective core instruction. So the goal would be, as best we can, every student is an individual and unique, that our students would be able to be serviced through differentiation in the general ed classroom and would not need to move up to Tier 2 or Tier 3, where in some cases they're pulled out of class to work either in a small group with an interventionist or one-to-one. Yeah, and Tier 1, we did not mention that. Tier 1, the general ed teacher documents student progress. So if they have their eye on a student and they have a concern, they are also responsible for progress monitoring and documenting. So I think we would hope that we do not see that, an increase in the number of students who are moving up the tiers.
Can you describe what that differentiation looks like in the classroom? Like if one teacher is teaching, like is she teaching 3 different levels, or she or he teaching 3 different levels? Is she teaching 10 different levels? Like how do you manage that as a teacher?
So I'll speak to that on the math side of things.
Okay.
And I'll stay really at the elementary level because that's where most of our responses have kind of pointed to. But in our Singapore Math or Math and Focus program, there's a number of components to that allow us to do the differentiation you're talking about. And one of the things that we really focus on is what we call a CPA model, which is kind of the core of Singapore Math. It's the idea that first the student can build a number with basically blocks. And then eventually, after they know how to build a number, they can represent that number pictorially. And they can do some modeling with visual models. And then once they get that, they move on to what we call the abstract, and that's the algorithm. What's interesting about that model that Singapore figured out before we did in the US is we really went to the standard US algorithm very quickly in our elementary grades. And so what we found is students understood symbolically how math worked, but they didn't understand what we call number sense, or the meaning behind those symbols. So how we differentiate in the elementary classroom is if a student is having problems with a visual model of mathematics, maybe an area model, what we'll do is we'll actually break out like manipulatives for the student to build an understanding of that. So we actually work within that CPA framework. So if someone doesn't get the abstract, we move back to the pictorial. If someone doesn't get the pictorial, we move back to the to the concrete. So that's one of the ways we do it. There's a number of other ways, but our focus, as Maria said, is on core instruction and looking at what research says is, or are great strategies for teaching all students in math. So how do we use games? How do we use stations? How do we use group work and collaborative work to support students in the classroom? So those are just a few ways. There are a lot of others, but that's our focus really, is how do we beef up that tier 1 differentiation, so that tier 2 hopefully isn't overutilized to the point that was made earlier. The one thing that I wanted to really thank the board for, and some of our data work this summer certainly helped inform what to do with our additional interventionists, is typically we were only able to provide extensive intervention services in grades 3, 4, and 5 in the elementary school. And beginning this year, we expanded more intervention services to K1 and 2. And to the point that was made earlier by Mrs. Baz, is the earlier we can do this, hopefully the less we'll need the supports later on. So that additional interventionist helped us do that. One of the reasons we were looking at all that data is we wanted to make sure we utilized the additional personnel well. And how we were going to service our K1, 2 students and still provide effective services to 3, 4, and 5 students at the elementary level. And just, we won't go into it, but on a secondary level where Maria and I are more directly involved in the supervision process in math and science, the letters that Mr. Mazzaro asked about, or the contact you asked about earlier, just like on the elementary level, it's really facilitated on the building level in the middle school and high school too. So if a student's going to receive intervention services in the middle school or high school, they'll receive a letter in math from me, or in ELA from Dr. Thompson. And that's 6 through 12.
Any questions? Okay.
The nature of workshop is differentiated. So, I'm gonna give it to Jean. She's dying to take it.
Workshop model is just, there's always a mini lesson. The mini lesson is supposed to be, they usually say take the child's age and add 2, not very scientific, but you figure a kindergartner who's 5 can really only sit for 7 minutes, so the whole class mini lesson should be about 7 to 8 minutes. That mini lesson is only going to reach about 80% of the kids, because for some kids it'll be too easy and for some kids it will be too hard. That's why we keep the mini lesson really tight. The kids go off and read it at their independent level, or they write at their independent level, and it gives the teacher the time to confer and to do small group work that's individualized to the student's needs. So that's sort of how they can manage it, because the kids are working independently while the teacher is sort of hopping around, maybe giving a table conference to 4 kids at one table, maybe sitting one-on-one with another child, maybe pulling a small group based on research or that she's done on the students, or maybe looking at the writing and seeing that a certain group of kids needs a certain skill or strategy. So that's sort of how teachers are able to manage it in the classroom.
And then can I ask one more question that kind of brings it back to when you were talking about crunching all this data and evaluating the learning, like you identified these markers for when you think a student is at risk. So when do you know that the core of the students is improving or getting that base curriculum? Like, is there a way to do a feedback loop? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So through the progress monitoring and the data that we collect
at the next
6 to 8 week cycles, and progress monitoring can take many different forms. So the classroom teacher will implement a research-based strategy to address the specific need of a student, and do that strategy with the student several times and then reassess, and whether or not we see growth from where they were the first time, so from the benchmark, will determine whether or not they're ready to move on to perhaps a different strategy to address the same need. So it's a cycle, it's a feedback cycle, and also there are many different I mean, there's a human component in all this.
Yeah.
We're talking about data.
I know.
But at the building level especially, in their meetings, a student could have a social emotional need, and that social emotional need is playing out academically.
Right.
So there are several different adults typically involved in progress monitoring in different ways.
Okay. And lastly, we wanted to show you a video of teachers. So this was, so we had the first cohort of teachers, of 30 teachers, and it was responsive classroom training was very well received by teachers. And so when I asked for a volunteer, a couple of teachers from Prospect Hill wanted to put together a video. So Ms. Carr, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
We've adopted the responsive classroom approach. This year, we've had our first cohort of teachers go through the training, so that's about 7 to 8 teachers from each of the elementary buildings. And as Julie said, the feedback has been extremely positive. We started with responsive classroom because it's not a program, it's really an approach, and it's based on the belief that if we merge the academic skills along with the social emotional skills, that we create a really safe learning environment for students. I think the nice piece about responsive classroom is that some of the additional practices, and one of them we highlighted in the video is morning meeting, helps to really build strong relationships amongst the classroom community and the students. And as we heard, that's really important for students, especially at the earlier grades. Morning meeting, even though all of our teachers are not trained, and it will take a few years for them to be trained in responsive classroom, all of the elementary schedules reflect time dedicated to morning meetings. So each teacher, even though they haven't been formally trained, we sort of turnkeyed it in-house, and each teacher is taking their children each morning through morning meeting. And there's 4 components, you'll see it in the video, but it really assures that every teacher is dedicating time to the social emotional skills that are so important. So, here's our video.
The sound.
Responsive classroom is an evidence-based approach that promotes higher teacher effectiveness, greater school student achievement, and an improved learning environment. The approach was designed by public school educators that had a vision of bringing together learning and academic success throughout the school day. In order for this to happen, there are 4 domains that influence this approach. The first is engaging academics. We have to create high-quality, rigorous instruction for our students. The second domain is a positive community. In order for this approach to be successful, we have to create a safe, predictable environment for our students that's joyful, where they all feel like they belong and that they have a significance in your classroom. The third is developmentally responsive instruction. We need to respond to students' individual, cultural, and developmental learning needs so that they can be successful. And finally, the 4th domain is an engaging environment. We need to create a calm and orderly environment that promotes autonomy and allows students to focus on their learning.
Good morning, Timothy. Good morning, Cassie. Good morning, Brett. Good morning, Sophie. Good morning, Juliana. Good morning, Mason.
Good morning, boys and girls. We're ready for our morning share, Monday's group. Stand up. Aileen, you can begin.
I went to an Irish dance competition and I got 3rd place. I went to the Kinetic Water Park and I went on the slide. I went to my lake house and I caught a 24-inch bass.
Good morning, boys and girls. Today's activity is really a tricky one. You have to pay attention. We're gonna play the game Did You Know? We want to make sure you're paying attention, you're pointing to one part of your body and saying another. Did you know this is my elbow?
Did you know this is my ear? Did you know this is my shoulder? Did you know this is my foot? Did you know this is my hair? Did you know this is my nose?
Good morning, class. Here's our morning message for today. Today is October 25th, 2019. Dear second grade, we've been learning about number order and patterns using numbers with the hundreds place value. Today, I want for you all to use all that you've learned and solve a puzzle. Put your thinking caps on and get ready to become mathematicians. Love and hugs, Miss Camacho.
The responsive classroom has been an incredible addition to our curriculum. In addition to students building on their academic skills, they're also building on their social emotional skills. Instead of me just telling them what the rules and routines and procedures are, I'm modeling for them one time and then having students model these behaviors for each other. This way, they're much more motivated to be able to show what they know. They know how to walk in line or sit properly. It also serves a great purpose of, instead of me giving reminders throughout the day, they're able to model for each other and give those reminders. So students are feeling much more empowered about their learning, and it's also building on their intrinsic motivation to always be the best learners they can be.
What I love most about having a responsive classroom is that we're not just classmates, we are family. Each day we learn more about each other, and that makes us very accepting of one another. I love my classroom because every day we walk in and it's all fun and laughs, but we're also respecting to one another.
Our class is awesome. My teacher showed us many different ways to keep our classroom calm. We are all allowed to be ourselves. I mean, come on, no two people are the same, right? We know that we all have strengths and we all have things we are working on, and that is just fine. She just wants us to be successful and happy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very exciting.
Yeah, lots of hard work ahead.
Yes.
Exciting to get updates on all of these efforts throughout the coming years, you know? Planting a lot of exciting seeds. Okay, so section 11, communications and comments from the public. Okay. Section 12, adjournment of the meeting.
This is you, Eileen.
Madam President, would you entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, Tom,
Thank you,
Julia.
everyone.